Welcome to Reach, your platform to connect with other executive assistants and acquire game-changing knowledge and perspective. Reach is designed to inspire your workday, guide you through pivotal moments in your career, and transform you into the executive assistant you've always wanted to be. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Reach. This is your host, Jessica Van. I'm the founder and CEO of Maven Recruiting Group, and today I have a very special guest with us. Hello, Matthew. How are you?
Hi, Jessica. How are you?
Very good. Thank you so much for being here. So Matthew McGuigan is the executive assistant to none other than the legendary René Redzepi, supporting a living legend, literally, in the food world. And a visionary comes with some unique challenges, as we can imagine, and also some extraordinary opportunities, which you're going to share more with us about. As executive assistant to René Redzepi, the world-renowned Danish chef and also co-owner of Noma, which is a restaurant that, for those who don't know, has been awarded 3 Michelin stars, is known for its groundbreaking use of hyper-local, seasonal, and foraged ingredients. And it was also lauded as the #1 restaurant in the world, which quite honestly is just blows your mind, right? When you really stop to contemplate what that even means.
But what does it mean? I think that's the question. Working in somewhere like that, I know, brings up as many questions as there are so many awards that are awarded to it. What does it mean to be the best restaurant in the world 5 times over? What are 3 Michelin stars?
Right. Is it like that sexiest man alive honor that People magazine?
You heard about that one that I got as well? I try to keep that one quiet.
It exudes. You can't keep that quiet, Matthew.
Stop it. No, but really, what is world's best restaurant? And I think that's something that we play around a lot with. How do you keep an accolade like that? What does it mean to work in a place with an accolade like that? What does it mean to be a guest and to come to a place with an accolade like that? And that throws up a lot of issues as well. Because as someone who works in these types of places, you're always trying to placate or give reference to the best. So to live up to that expectation is always incredibly difficult. And I think that goes with any restaurant, whether that's Noma or not, anything that plays within fine dining or the Michelin sphere. What does it mean to have 1 Michelin star? What does it mean to have 3 Michelin stars? And how do you equate that to whether you're worthwhile or not? So for me as a restaurant, I think of what we do at Noma as more from a place to work as opposed to as a guest-facing role. What does it mean to work at Noma? And then what does it mean to work at the best restaurant in the world? And I think that gives a lot more clarity and scope behind what it is to have a position here. It means you come to work with a different ideology every day. You come to work with a want to be better, and to always explore. I really see that in every single person who works here. They come wanting to find what else. It's a challenge that gets given to you by René, by the executive chefs, by everyone who works here. Keep questioning. Because I think once you come to a place that has all of these accolades, you then have the possibility to coast, because you go, okay, I'm at the best place in the world.
Right.
Let's just stay there. But you can never just stay there. And that's the same with a Google or an IBM or a whatever. It's okay, how do we continue to innovate? And I think that's a very interesting place about here specifically. It's always, what is next?
What's next?
Exactly. What is the world's best restaurant in 20 years from now? How do you continue to innovate to look for something different, to do something else for society that's outside of just
Right.
the restaurant sphere.
No, I really like the point that you're bringing up. And I think typically our guests are not coming from the food world. They're not supporting the living food legends of the day. Although we did have Lori Woolever on our program, and she, of course, used to work for Tony Bourdain, is a three-time best-selling author. But other than that, we don't normally have people from the food world. You know, most of them represent organizations, companies, publicly traded companies, things like this. But the point that you bring up about this thirst and drive toward innovation, I think is really ubiquitous, right? Because it's whether we're talking about the food world or we're talking about other types of corporations, it's this push for what's next, whether it's a product, whether it's an experience, whether it's a craft. There's this constant kind of resistance to stasis, because if you become static, you become like the BlackBerry, right? And whoever,
100%.
nobody owns
BlackBerry,
those, right?
exactly.
Nobody wants to be the BlackBerry of the world, whether it's food or technology. So I think that's what's really interesting, in diving into your world and Noma's world and René's world, is just this constant kind of thirst for pushing the boundaries, pushing the frontiers, and this resistance to kind of predictability or, familiar, right? It's this constant quest for the unfamiliar.
And I think it's nice to live in familiarity. I think it gives you a place of comfort. It allows you to feel the ability to explore, if that makes sense. We want to create a familiar, comfortable work environment, because that allows people to be able to try to be at their best, but then you still need to challenge. We want people to come into work and go, okay, I feel comfortable here. I'm enjoying this. I can see myself in this place for 20 years. And who says that in the food world? No one, realistically.
Yeah, right.
We want our staff to come in and say, okay, this feels like family, but now I have the chance to innovate. Now I have the chance to go beyond what is on the plate and try and find what's the next enzyme that we're going to be using to break down whatever,
Yeah.
Take it to the science world, make it bigger than what is just food.
Yeah.
And let's not forget, food is everywhere. Food is on everyone's table, hopefully. Food is something that we all interact with on a daily basis, multiple times a day. So it is intrinsically important to absolutely everyone. So I think what we do as a restaurant is intrinsically important to absolutely everyone, whether you know what Noma is or not. It just means that we, as staff of Noma, need to push further than the Noma reputation as a restaurant.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd love to hear in your words, I mean, what does food represent to René, but what does food represent to all of you, right? Because clearly food is no longer just food. When we're talking about this, to me, like as an outsider, it seems like clearly there's an artistry element. Clearly there's a muse kind of fascination. There's clearly a scientific element, right? It's kind of this merging of all of these things. But how would you characterize it?
I think the funny thing is, depending on the chef that you speak to, food is different. Whether it's artistic or not is different. A lot of chefs will just say, I'm a chef, I cook, I make good food. And in a lot of ways, they're completely right. But it depends how you want to break it down for yourself, and how far you want to take it. For René, food is everything. If you ask René what is food, he will say it is the most important thing on this planet. Because food is what makes us healthy and makes us unhealthy. And food is what makes the planet healthy and unhealthy. And those are the two most important things, whether you have a life and whether the planet has a life. And these impact everything that we do on a daily basis. So food is truly everything. It's then how you interact with it that makes it what it is to you. And that's down to a personal preference. No, it's like, okay, do I want to be eating McDonald's, or do I want to be eating a pasta that my grandma made, or that, I don't know, a nonna made in Italy that has sentimental value? And that's, I think, from a childhood point of view, where you get that connection from. What's food for you?
I mean, I'm food obsessed.
Who isn't these days?
I
Really?
mean, a lot of people aren't, though. I don't know. I mean, speaking for myself, my entire day, the clock of my day is oriented around what am I going to eat? Thinking about it, planning for it, prepping for it. If I go on a trip, the anchor points are always what I want to experience. I mean, food for me is almost like living anthropology. It's like it's a way of digesting a culture, quite literally, right?
Food and language, they're the
Food
ways
and language,
to
they're
understand the culture.
completely
100%.
intertwined. You don't understand a people, you don't understand a culture unless you delve into their food. So, you know, that's my favorite thing about traveling. I mean, that's always how I decide where to go, and also what I'm going to do while I'm there. So, yeah, I mean, I'm a little obsessed.
Are you one of these people who travel for food, or when you're
Yeah,
somewhere,
I will.
it's about, okay.
I will
And
definitely travel.
for me, I'm exactly the same.
Yeah.
I will go to a place because I know restaurants are there. And that's exactly the same as everyone who works here as well. We will travel for restaurant experiences.
Yeah.
But I guess as a chef or as someone in the food world, that's a learning experience as well. Because it gives you a way of understanding a culture, but also breaking down how these top restaurants of the world are serving, thinking about food, how they're thinking about presence within a restaurant.
Right.
What is the overall experience for a guest at a place like this?
Yeah.
Which makes it tricky sometimes to actually switch off. I think it's similar to a musician or an actor. When you go to the symphony and you sit down, you're always analyzing what's going on. Or if you're an actor, you go to the cinema, you're always analyzing what's going on. It's the same for someone in the food industry.
So, were you always into food, Matthew, or how did this? I mean, I'd love to hear how you
You've
ended
got
up
a
in
bit of
this
background
role.
information on this, no?
A little bit, but I'd like to hear it in your words. I mean, this is such a. I mean, this is a one-of-one job. There's no two. There is no two jobs like this. You know, you can be an executive assistant in venture capital. There's thousands of roles like that. This job is one of one. So how do you end up in this position? And I guess the second part is, you know, were you always drawn to the culinary world?
Hard work, dumb luck, not understanding what I necessarily wanted, but still wanting to work hard and go for something that was bigger than me. I think I've always explored what is more than just being a person. I thought back on this a few weeks ago. When I was in high school, you always go to a career counselor and they tell you, oh, this is what you're going to end up doing.
Right.
At that point in my life, I was a classical musician. I was playing piano. I was singing, doing lots of musical theater. I was like, I want to be a superstar. And the counselor said, oh, I think you should try and be a chef. And in my mind, I was like, no way in hell I want to be a chef. Like, this didn't even play into who I was. Even though I always enjoyed food. But I didn't understand the methodical and creative side behind it. I left school and I was lucky enough to be a musician. I mean, I got into one of the top classical music schools in the world and studied at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama in London. Did opera for years, 2 masters, but through study realized I had to understand business, because there's no assuredness in life as a creative, which is a very scary thought, because we have more and more people going into creative schools. I mean, there's a list as long as anyone's arm of people wanting to audition at classical music schools or go to classical art schools, but there's no jobs for these people. So how do you balance this? And I really realized that going through school. How do I create something for myself that allows me to have an income outside of wanting to be a classical musician? So I was lucky enough to get an internship at IMG, and started to understand the behind the scenes of what it was to be in the music industry, work as an artist manager. How do you sell artists? What is it to sell someone in the creative world, and how do you create contracture around them? How do you create a business around an art form? I came out of that and realized it wasn't a world I wanted to be in. Selling something so close to myself was slightly dirty, if that makes sense. But it really gave me an understanding. So after closing that chapter, I moved to Berlin, really followed my dream of being an artist, and worked as a professional opera singer for years throughout Germany, throughout the world. But on the side, had my own business, started working as a PA. I got contacted by IMG asking me to do a little bit of freelance work for them. And that's where the business really started. I started to take on a few musicians, started to do some PA work for them, then started to take on some bigger businessmen, build out my own roster. And that started to balance my life. I was working as a classical musician, but also working as a businessman and traveling the world doing it. And it allowed me to realize what freedom was in a lot of ways. Then Corona came along and shut everything down. I couldn't work as a musician anymore because everything that I was doing was from a freelance point of view. And then that business side saved me. I could work from a remote cabin in the Swedish countryside with my partner and create a life for myself because I had a business background at this point.
Right.
And that's when I started to really study business. I started to do online courses. I did a mini MBA. I wanted to really understand what business was and to allow that to really proliferate more of what I was doing. At that point, I didn't see myself getting back into music. I think I had closed that chapter to an extent. And that's when I really entered the food world in a different way. Corona finished. I made the decision to move to Copenhagen, which is truly a food mecca. I mean, some of the best restaurants in the world established themselves here. And I met an Australian businessman who had just opened a restaurant group here in Copenhagen called the Arc Collection, which specialized in fine dining, but from a plant-based point of view. So vegan fine dining, which is a very hard sell. But I cut my chops, like I got into a business that was a very hard sell, and we turned it into a thing. We were sold out night after night. We got rave reviews from all over the world. We opened 2 other restaurants at 3 different price points and started to build a business. And that's really where I started to understand the food world. We won the first Green Michelin-star in the Nordic countries, which was amazing. We won a Bib Gourmand for the second restaurant in the tier. And by that, I started to understand what the food world was. By no means on the Noma level, but I really started to see what it was to, we say, live in service. The food world is all about giving yourself to other people. And really, that's what business is as well, no? I really equate it to very similar things. You need to understand what someone wants to be able to sell it to them, to be able to create a product, to be able to then create revenue and profit. It all goes hand in hand in so many ways.
Oh, it
It's
does.
just the margins are so much slimmer in the food world.
Yeah, there's that. Yes. But I mean, what you're talking about, I mean, we hear a lot of our clients talking about product market fit and figuring out what that looks like. And that's exactly what you have to perfect in what you offer and what you literally bring to the table.
Yeah, exactly. In every single way. For me, it all comes down to what are we bringing to the table? What is the guest experience? We want them to leave happy. But I guess the Noma world goes beyond what the guest experience is these days. I think we've got to, in a lot of ways, the top of what we can get to as a restaurant. And I look at this from a René point of view now. What's the next challenge? You can't win best restaurant of the world more than 5 times, and nor would you want to realistically. There's no more than 3 Michelin stars. So what do we do next that allows him to still feel creative, that brings in revenue in a creative way for the team, so they're not just doing the same thing over and over and over.
Right.
And I know this is where the whole pop-up idea started to come from. Let's go and explore other cultures.
Right.
Let's learn other languages. Let's experience different foods. Live the way you're meant to live when you're in this industry, which is to always be challenged.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit more about that for those that aren't familiar? Because obviously you guys have a long tradition of hosting these pop-ups, whether it was Japan, Australia. You mentioned that you're about to do one in Los Angeles.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit more about, I guess, what drives those as far as, also Tulum, that was a very famous one, Mexico.
Totally.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit more about kind of what drives the site selection? What are you and the team seeking in where you choose to base yourself? And then from your perspective, as the person who has to orchestrate this three-ring circus.
Team, thank God it's not just me doing this.
I mean, like, it's mind-boggling. Yeah. Imagining transferring an entire population of people, a staff, their families, their children, logistically setting them up, creating a functional existence for, I don't know, is it 6 months at a time, 1 year? What is that time frame?
It changes pop-up to pop-up, but okay. Yeah, it can be up to 6 to 10 months. Yeah. Generally open as a restaurant for 3 to 4. Okay. But then you need to build the restaurant, don't you? It's not as if we're just going into a ready-made space that's ready for us. Right. Noma has expectations. Noma has a style. So we need to find places that are in line with our style, but are also incredibly contra to our style. We want it to be a learning experience, number one. The first pop-up we ever did in Tokyo was thrown together in a few weeks, way before my time. Was done with a handful of staff, and 3 people lived in a hotel room at a time. We were open for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and everyone came away from it going, that was an incredible experience. And from there, it really proliferated and became part of the culture. What's next? How do we learn more? And how do we turn this into an enjoyable experience for everyone? You mentioned Tulum. That was an incredible one. This is a cool thing. In a staff of 100 people, 120 people, we've got 37 different nationalities. Wow. So for us, it's integrating culture in every single way. What's going to be a learning experience for every single one of these cultures that they haven't lived in previously. So going to Mexico was a completely different understanding of what food was compared to the Nordic food tradition. We wanted to understand what it was to work with indigenous produce, what it was to live in a tropical climate, understand what it was to set up a restaurant on the beach in a jungle.
In the jungle, yeah.
In the jungle. The canopy, the roof were trees. And to work in that sort of environment is phenomenal. Mm-hmm. It has massive challenges, but is phenomenal. And I guess Japan is the complete opposite to that. How do you work in such a structured culture that has hundreds and hundreds of years of tradition, specifically in the food tradition, where you go to a restaurant that only works on chicken skewers, or you go to a restaurant that only works on sushi, and becomes masters in that. So for us to go to a place like Japan was about learning technique, about learning how to really specialize in something, whereas going to Tulum was the opposite. It was breaking things down. It was about learning big flavor, where we'd become so concentrated on refinement before then. Really, one of the great things that we got out of going to Mexico was understanding how to pulverize again. Before, we were using blenders constantly, whereas we went to a culture that used their hands, used rock to create flavor, which was a massive learning curve for us. And you wouldn't really think about that being a learning experience, but for us it was a massive thing to come back from that and go, we can use our hands in a 3 Michelin-starred way.
Yeah, that's a really interesting soundbite. I like that. You know, I'm curious your thoughts on kind of what is the balance between drawing inspiration and sampling and celebrating and, you know, paying homage to a culture and a food tradition. You mentioned two, Japan and Mexico, versus the tension around kind of appropriation, right? And kind of coming in, rubber stamping it, adding your 3 Michelin stars and saying tortillas are now, you know, a Michelin star event, right? And it's complicated. So I'm curious your thoughts on all that.
I saw this question on the question sheet that you sent over, and it scared the hell out of me. I was like, cultural appropriation is such a tricky world right now. And I think even more so in the States than probably here in Europe. We live in a land that's the same size as the United States, but is made up of 35 different countries. And a lot of different cultures that interact in a completely different way to what it is to live in a place like the United States. But then in saying that, I come from Australia. And I think in a lot of ways, we have a lot more similarities with the States than we do with Europe. We're a newer land, we're a land built on immigration. There's a lot of separation between big cities, so that creates a culture unto itself to these cities. We need to play a fine balance at Noma when it comes to cultural appropriation, but we never say that this is us doing Mexican food. We never say this is us doing Japanese food. It is us taking inspiration from the places that we go, taking learnings, but never trying to recreate. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think about, you know, there's, so in the book Hungry, which I'm sure you've obviously read, so it's sort of like this, this mole theme is woven quite literally through almost the entire text, where it's like different iterations of mole, René's fixation around mole. How do we, you know, come to understand this really nebulous, traditional, historical thing that is mole, right? And so like in the end, you end up producing his version of a mole, which I think is like a green mole, and it's a little bit more, it sounds, at least in the description, like a little fresher and not, you know, so it's not the same thing. But it's informed by his experience of it, and then it's sort of like, you know, redacted and whatever.
I don't know how much you know about sauces, but what is a mother sauce? It's the same as if we talk about a hollandaise. I mean, a hollandaise sauce is something that's so ingrained in Western tradition, in French food, but has been iterated on numerous times. Maybe it has less cultural significance than a mole does. But truthfully, I couldn't say, because I'm not from that tradition. And this is where I come down to taking inspiration and iterating as opposed to saying, this is us doing. We would never say a Noma taco. We would say a Noma burger. We did a burger. And truthfully, a burger has as many cultural significances around it as a taco might, depending how you want to talk about it. Bringing it back to appropriation, it's just a very tricky world to be in.
It is.
I was thinking about it slightly with my other hat on, going back to being a musician. And I don't know how much you know about classical music and the evolution of classical music, but during the late 1800s, early 1900s, composers became obsessed with what was Asian, what was pentatonic, which is a 5-note scale that makes up what we deem as an Asian sounding world. And all composers at the time were using this. This was Puccini, this was Strauss, this was Ravel. They created complete new sound worlds that a Western ear hadn't heard before because they traveled and heard different things in Asia. If we listen to it now, we might think of it as cultural appropriation, and a lot of people will say something like Puccini's Turandot, which is a masterwork. Everyone knows Nessun Dorma. Everyone in the world knows Nessun Dorma. But a lot of people in the opera world will say this is cultural appropriation. And yes, it is. But it also furthered an art form. So to an extent, in food, in culture, in cinema, in music, we use cultural appropriation to further ourselves from the time that we're in now to look forward. It's only in that presence that we go, we're using a skill, an asset to further what we know. Then it's only in the future that you really see it as appropriation, maybe.
Sure. No, I absolutely hear you. And I also think it matters the approach and the intention and kind of, are you coming at it from the perspective of admiration, curiosity, appreciation, and are you offering something from that kind of a mindset and that kind of a place versus, something that's a lot more kind of sinister or whatever. But no, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's everywhere. And whether we're talking about the Tulum experience and the mole or whatever, I mean, we talk about any number of dishes that it's very clearly, you can trace sort of the migratory experience. You can trace oftentimes the colonizer influence. You can taste or sometimes the influence of slavery and emancipation and all these other things woven into a dish, or a form of dance or a form of music, as you described.
Phenomenal.
I
truly love the, like you said, anthropological point of view of looking at a culture, looking at food, at a restaurant, the history. It allows you to paint or weave a colorful tapestry in the most beautiful way. I mean, when you talk about the migratory experience of Noma, it makes me go, okay, we need to turn this into a documentary series.
That would be something.
I might hold you to that one.
Right? As long as I get tickets to the pop-up, I'm very glad to support. It's, so I study samba, and that's kind of like a side passion project, what have you. And I recently asked one of my teachers who's deeply knowledgeable, her name is Taina Damasceno, and I asked her, I said, where does this tradition of like the feathers and the jewels and all of this come from? What I'm talking about in Carnival. And she was saying, well, there's a lot of schools of thought around that, but one of the things is it's a nod to, the feathers is kind of a nod to Africa, to the slave trade that brought the Africans to Brazil. It's also a nod to more of the indigenous cultures. But the jewels was kind of a borrowing from the Spanish courts, where they were oftentimes, these dancers were brought in to perform for the Spanish courts and the royalty. And it was their way of kind of saying, okay, so you've got these jewels and all of these adornments and whatever. Well, we're going to take that too. And we're gonna start adorning ourselves, and we're gonna start glorifying our bodies, and we're gonna start celebrating our bodies, and we're not just going to be sort of hidden in the background. And that's also where you start to see the costuming becoming more and more and more small. And these days, it's basically microscopic.
It's nothing, isn't it?
It's nothing. But it was also a kind of a resistance and a celebration of their bodies, and saying, you know, these bodies, our bodies, are beautiful. We're not just going to kind of continue to hide them or bury them or whatever. But my point is, like, you have this art form that is so clearly kind of evolved because of both good and bad, difficult influences, but here we are, right? And it's like this beautiful amalgamation of so many different things. And I
think that's where I come back to with this idea of appropriating a culture. Appropriation has so much negative connotation to it, but there's always negative, there's always positive with something like this. At the end of the day, it's just growth of what we have, and hopefully growth for the positive. It is.
That's the hope. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. So how did you guys decide on Los Angeles as the next locale?
Something completely different. We've never really done America before.
Right.
And America's one of these places that's scary.
Okay. Yeah, sure. I mean, in what sense is, I mean, I get it, but
so much possibility.
Okay. The opportunity.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. How do you do it justice? How do we go to the States as Noma and continue to be Noma when we go to Hollywood? And what does Hollywood and Noma look like? I think it's been something that's been on René's mind for such a long time. I want to do LA, but how do we do it? And now we're kind of at that point where we understand what we want. We understand that, I guess, cultural amalgamation. We really focus on produce. We focus on storytelling. I mean, the breadth of stories that are integrated into the world of LA, in a way, feeds into what we did in Mexico as well. Like, there are so many ties to this. So it was just a logical next step. Yeah, I'm excited.
Well, oh, yeah. I mean, it's absolutely. And also, LA is such a melting pot in and of itself. It's already, sure. I mean, every possible culture is represented there that you can imagine. So it's a pretty vibrant.
I mean, I've never lived there before. I was in New York for a while, and really loved New York, but couldn't stay. Mm-hmm. I really missed that European sensibility, whereas my sister was there for 5 years and fell in love with the city. She's now living back in Australia, but would move back to New York with a heartbeat. Mm-hmm. And I know LA is completely different to that, but still has that push. Mm-hmm. You know, I think all American cities really has this drive behind it, and that feeds into this Noma culture. It's like, okay, reach for the stars, keep going, build what you can build, and then see how it goes. Just kind of go for broke. And that's an amazing way of thinking about going to the States. We could screw everything up, but we're gonna effing try, you know? I think that's amazing.
It seems like all of you who work there are comfortable living on the cusp of everything. Brilliance and absolute failure all the time. Or disaster and...
Brilliance comes from failure, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. I think that's an amazing thing. And something else I don't know, toying with in my head the other day. Noma's built on failure. I mean, 1% of all dishes that are worked on within the test kitchen end up on the table. So as a chef working in the test kitchen, your day is built around not good enough or wanting to learn from what never eventuated because these dishes don't go down. But I think that's an amazing place to learn from because it's constantly creative. And you realize how methodical creativity needs to be as well. You're not creative in a vacuum. You need to be able to feed creative process with stability. And I think that's something that Noma does incredibly well. It puts walls around how to be creative, but allows you the structure that you need to develop within it. And I think that's the same in the majority of big creative fields as well. You speak to people who are within, I don't know, quantum physics. They need to understand structure to be able to break down the creative quality within it. No?
Do you think that instinct comes directly from René, and that's sort of what he's brought, and then he's brought people in who are oriented around a similar kind of mindset?
Yes and no. I think most people who come here search for that anyway. It's a company that's been around for 25 years. So I think René initiated that thought process, that drive within the culture at the start, and then people come seeking it. I think people really, if they're applying to work at Noma, then they know what they're getting into. They know they're applying for, I would say, an educational experience.
Yeah.
You come to Noma knowing you're going to work hard, but you're going through a process of evolution. You know the company is going to continue growing with you. And I think that's why we hold on to staff for so long. We have people who have been here 15, 20 years. And it's because they can continuously evolve within a comfortable environment that allows them to be uncomfortable.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say. Is it seems like those who come are coming because they're comfortable being changed.
Yep.
And being part of that change process.
And for me, that's why I'm so happy. I've been here going on 2 years now.
Yeah.
And I really came at a point where it's changing. I mean, we talk about closing as a restaurant. We talk about the end of 2.0. What is next for Noma? And I really came on at this pivot point, which was the most exciting thing about coming to work at this restaurant. How do you get involved with a company that has been around for so long, has changed so much within an industry, and still wants to innovate and change itself?
Yeah.
What does that look like? How do you build that out? What are the structures within it that need to change or that need to be consolidated to be able to allow it to grow? How does a restaurant turn into a company? How does it turn into something that's bigger beyond just serving guests?
Right.
And what are the structures around that?
Right. And I imagine that's a lot of what your role entails and helps to translate, because, you know, we didn't talk so much about this, but there's a lot of these, I think he calls them projects, right? Where it's like, there's this curation of, you have like a coffee curation, you have other, like the foundation, like there's all of these other, you mentioned it was in jest, but, you know, like a documentary series or whatever, but there's all of these other kind of, it's a brand. Noma is a brand. It's not a restaurant, it's a brand. And so kind of figuring that out, is that a lot of also what you spend your time kind of considering, or at least enabling to happen?
For sure. I think what I do is enable conversation. We as a company have the right people in place. We've got an amazing chief brand officer. We've got an amazing COO. We've got René, who's a complete visionary. We've got Thomas Friebel, who is an incredible creative director. It's about connecting the conversations that need to happen between these people and making sure that they are turning into the fruitful conversations that need to happen to be able to grow as a company. I think this is the role of an EA. It's about understanding the bigger picture, whereas these people really need to focus in on their roles.
Yeah, and enabling that to happen, enabling the right people to come to the table.
And I
with the
think this
right
is where I talk about creating that structure, creating a base to then grow from.
Yeah. So working as closely as you have with René for the almost 2 years that you mentioned, I mean, what has that taught you about vision? What has that taught you about creativity, about drive, about leadership? And I guess kind of the discipline that underscores all of those things and enables that to happen. Like what are you taking from this?
Always question. Always question. And back to this point, creativity doesn't happen in a vacuum. Create structure around yourself so you can be creative. And I think that's really what I try and do for him to enable his creativity. It's allow him to have structure on a daily basis. Put in time with the kitchen so he can create dishes. That's where his love is. That's where his foundation is. But then allow him to have thinking space. Allow him to have walking space. The man talks about walking constantly, and I understand why. He needs to be in motion, and a lot of people need that motion to be able to allow their minds to run wild as well. We're all active people in this restaurant, and I think that is something that gets built upon once you enter into this space. But I think people who come for their trials or whatever really understand that from the get-go. We all move fast and we all exercise outside of here as well. Thomas does triathlons, René does the Camino Trail, I do CrossFit, we have marathon runners. Everyone needs to, well, they need a place outside of this restaurant to really let go and think. And I think a lot of thinking is done within exercise.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of release as well. And I think it's interesting because we had another guest on. We haven't released her episode yet, but needless to say, it's coming. She's great. Her name is Chris Cordell. But she worked for these other also massive, mega star executives, Stuart Butterfield, who started Slack, and some other folks. And
Wow.
And what she talked about was, this idea of balance and the necessity for it. And I think that your point also is underscoring that brilliance requires downtime, and it requires replenishment, and
For sure.
it requires, and so it's interesting because we often get the opposite of that in just work and grind and all this kind of stuff. But I think so much of what's important, especially in a support role, is being able to recognize that absolute need for balance, rejuvenation, restoration, support. That is support.
100%. And that's one thing that I really realized from day one with René, how important family is to him, and how to create time for family. The need for him to be with family, that's his rejuvenation, along with exercise. But family time for him is everything. When he walks away from here, I want him to forget about here as much as possible, so he can spend quality time with the 5 girls in his life, wife, 3 kids, and dog. And they're all incredible girls. So it's understanding that family plays such a pivotal role in allowing him to be who he is. But I think that's the case when you work with any executive. They're all different. it's understanding the eccentricities of each of them to allow them to blossom, to work at their top. When you're a support structure, I'm not here to be the creative. I'm here to facilitate the creative. I'm here to give structure to the creative and to the brilliance. Granted, I'm a creative myself, and I was, but I know I'm not here to be that person. Being the creative allowed me to understand the creative.
Very much so. Oh, and that's very clear. I don't think anybody that's not has that kind of creative drive and fervor could really understand him to the extent that is necessary. So I think your background as an artist, as a performer, it's essential, I would think.
Yeah, and to an extent, truthfully, I think more than being a chef. I think being a chef could have been a hindrance in this because I would have been too methodical. I would have been too structured on what him being a chef was. Whereas I see it as a holistic understanding of what creativity is. The man surrounds himself with art. I mean, it's phenomenal. He listens to music on a daily basis. It comes back to this creativity cannot happen in a vacuum, but it's also not just your world of creativity. You need to draw inspiration from absolutely everything to be able to find a way of letting your creativity out.
Right.
And for him, yes, that's through food, but you see it in everything that he does. It's also through how he interacts with people. It's how he builds a company. He thinks outside of the box on a daily basis.
Right. And that's, going back to the very first things we were talking about around the riskiness of a creative career and the fact that it's not really financially viable. And it's really quite sad because it's like, all of these things are what drive inspiration, ingenuity, all of these things. And it's like if we had a world of just, automatons who were all programmers. I mean, that's kind of what happened in San Francisco. San Francisco used to have a really funky, eclectic kind of a vibe. And over time, it became sort of eradicated by all of the tech people and the developers and the front end and the back end. And it sort of pushed out this funky, quirky, experimental culture, that we had. And it really did change the energy of a place. And so I don't know, it's like it's this very tricky thing because we need that. We need that kind of energy, we need that kind of learning, we need that kind of exposure to offer the world all of these incredible exploits that that come from that space.
I think it's truly tragic. I really do. The fact that artists can't afford to live anymore unless they become mainstream, and the lack of support for artists globally. I mean, I look at my partner. He's an incredible violinist, and he's one of the lucky ones to have a full-time seat in an orchestra. But you see funding being pulled from orchestras and opera companies and ballet companies and any artist collective constantly around the world at the moment. And nor can you afford to have a normal life, even as a full-time seated musician. Copenhagen's expensive, but by no means is it the most expensive city in the world. But if he were to try and live by himself on a full-time artist salary, he wouldn't be living in the city. He'd be eating, I don't know, things that we don't necessarily want to be eating.
Or he'd be foraging,
It's a tricky life.
It is.
But I really think these artists are the heroes in a lot of way because they're the ones who are really creating the joy in life these days. Otherwise, you're right, would all be lawyers and programmers that didn't really have something we wanted to live for.
Yeah.
We'd be stuck watching Marvel. Heaven forbid.
Exactly. Heaven forbid. So it's interesting now that I spend time I moved to Tucson, Arizona, which is a much more economical place. It's a more forgiving place to live, and it's interesting because there's a lot more artist influence here, and you can see it because it's more forgiving. You don't need to have a 6-figure salary just to have an apartment. You can manage, and it's nice because I can see that that playfulness coming out.
For sure. And it's something I really miss about London. London had a thriving arts scene, especially while I was there as a student. I thought it was amazing. I would not want to go back to live there now, because to actually afford to have a lifestyle in London, you need to be a multi-millionaire or an investment banker, who tend to be multi-millionaires. It's just a tricky way of life. And you see this happening with every major city around the world. Mm-hmm. I find it really, really sad that they lack the soul that they used to have.
Yeah.
So it's these smaller cities that you see having a thriving art scene that comes up. But then what's going to happen to that in 50 years' time? Does that become the next place that all of the rich people want to move to because it became the cool place? And I don't know.
Exactly. And then we're constantly chasing that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to plug Tucson for a pop-up idea. Only because, not because of me, but because there's an incredible foraging tradition. Like there's
Really?
like oh yeah. You will find me and my children on the side of the road any given day during prickly pear season.
Jessica, I think you need to take me foraging. This sounds fun.
This is what I do. And my kids are like, Mom, I don't know. Like, this one's a church, Mom. Like, maybe you shouldn't forage in the church. I'm like, oh, for God's sake, no one's using this. So, and then I'll go and I'll make like a syrup or whatever. But there's all of these interesting, indigenous ingredients that are abundant in the desert.
But it's becoming cool, isn't it?
It's very cool.
Like, people are going out and seeing what they can find.
Yeah.
I think that's amazing. That's one thing that Noma has done for this world, that
100%.
says food is around you.
Food is everywhere,
Go
as
and
you said.
find it.
Go and find it. Yeah. Yeah, it makes it accessible. And I think that stokes the ecological, also creative, juices that we need to really harness.
Look, this comes back to food is the most important thing. It makes you healthy, it makes you unhealthy, it makes the world healthy and unhealthy. Understanding the food around you, where it comes from, the people who are touching it, how it grows, gives you an intuitiveness to what the planet needs. It just makes you think bigger than yourself. When you know what's going into your mouth, you go, okay, now I understand what a prickly pear needs to be able to grow well,
Right.
I understand what a mirabelle needs to grow well. They're growing everywhere in Copenhagen, and you see little kids going out and picking them at late summer and eating plums off trees. It gives you a connection to nature in a way that I think we need these days.
I agree. Yep. And being in balance with that. So final question, Matthew.
Go for it.
Here we go. You already work for a great one, but if there was another person that you could support, who would you choose to support? This could be throughout the entire course of history, living or dead.
I think I'd go back to music, actually. Leonard Bernstein. Incredible man. Like, truly incredible man. Changed music, was a revolutionary, but might have needed more support. He couldn't find himself as a person. He traveled the world, but had issues with depression, and I think that comes down to him not understanding who he was and maybe just needing a little bit more structure around him. Mm-hmm. But my God, to have learnt from someone like that, to have understood a world in flux the way the world was at his time, especially within culture, I think really to have worked with or for or in any way around this man would have been an incredible learning experience.
But I think your answer, I think, is very revealing in that I think it says a lot about how you approach the support model, and that being that, who are they? What's going to enhance their natural gifts? What challenges do they have? How can I ease that? How do I mold to them? And I think that says a lot about also, working for the person that you work for. It's not a straightforward 8 to 5 kind of an operation. This is a complicated person with complicated dreams and, ambitions.
At the end of the day, people are people. And when you're working with people, especially this type of person, you need to understand that there are complications. You need to understand that, hey, we all have good days. We all have bad days. This is a roller coaster for everyone. Life is a roller coaster for everyone. As a support role, you need to be along for that ride, and realize that it does get bumpy sometimes, but enjoy that, because then you get to understand a person in a different way. And I think that's the most beautiful thing about being in a role like this. No matter who you're working for, you're seeing people evolve and change, and that's not something you see in every single role.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very, very privileged seat. I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much, Matthew. You definitely, you brought it.
I don't know. I just kept talking.
No, you did. I love it. I love how extemporaneous you are, and I can see, it's almost like I can see the musician in you. You flow, and I like it. It was great, and this was
really a pleasure.
Really fun conversation. Thank you so much.
No, really. Thank you.
Reach is brought to you by Maven Recruiting Group, who specializes in placing executive assistants and support staff to the Bay Area's most prominent executives and companies. If you've enjoyed being part of our podcast community and are interested in becoming part of our candidate community, we're currently hiring for roles in San Francisco, Silicon Valley, and Los Angeles. You can visit us at www.mavenrec.com to see some of the roles we're currently working on and to submit your resume.